This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. Some of you who are listening to this are people who have been subscribed to my channel, maybe recently, maybe for a long time. And some of you might be seeing this video for the first time, not aware of any of the stuff that's going on. So I want to break this down for you as simply as I possibly can. If you're someone who has been duped by the mainstream media to where you hear something about conspiracies, you suddenly dismiss it and you think that it's crazy people with tinfoil hats, this announcement is for you because you've been duped. I'm going to show you exactly how and why. You probably are wondering, why in the world is all this stuff going on the last few years? And you're thinking to yourself, man, that's just something that happened and, those things happen. But in reality, those things don't happen. Those things happen when change is needed to come in and people are trying to bring about change. Now, you might be familiar with the industrial age, right? You're living in it. Well, you were. Where cars were popping up, industries, Coca-Cola, factories, Ford, all that stuff. And you think to yourself, well, the industrial age, right? Well, I want to welcome you to the fourth industrial revolution. You might say, what in the world is that? Well, it has everything to do with you, your life, and everything that's happening in the world right now. It has to do with resetting a button and starting from scratch. That includes your wealth, your bank account, and you as a human being. Now, the only way they can change you as a human being, other than, of course, manipulating your brain, is by physically, literally being inside your body. Now, I want to introduce you to a man named Klaus Schwab. Not much of a man, really a demon. Klaus Schwab, you might say, why does this guy matter? Well, you may be familiar with the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, all of these big, rich, elite families you've heard of. And you might have said, yeah, they own all the wealth and control all this stuff. Well, Klaus Schwab is married to a Rothschild. The Rothschilds are the ones who control and run the Federal Reserve. That's where your money comes from. That's where your home comes from, your apartment, what you go to work for. Every day comes from this guy, this family, I should say, this bloodline of the Rothschilds, who are the Federal Reserve. Unsanctioned and uncontrollable. These people, whether you want to believe it or not, are not good people. Klaus Schwab is married into that bloodline. Now, Klaus Schwab holds a meeting every year. The meeting's called Davos, the World Economic Forum in Davos. And in that meeting, your president, for whatever country you're in, is likely in attendance. That would mean currently in America, Joe Biden. In the past, Donald Trump has been there. Obama's been there. In Canada, Justin Trudeau, been there. Groomed by them, of course. Putin, been there. Zelensky of Ukraine, you might have heard of him as well, been there. They all go there and flock there to a meeting. And in this meeting, it's controlled and run by this man, Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab is about to tell you what his plans are for humanity. That's right. That means for you, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mother, your father, your daughter, your son. And that's why you need to know about this, because they're not joking around with what I'm about to show you. Because this following announcement has indeed been paid for by the New World Order.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
The difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, right. Just as an example, it's you who are changed. Yeah, and of course, this has a big impact on your identity.
Yeah. And offers certain kinds of possibilities that have to be careful about. When you began to do that kind of gene editing, some people worry that you are changing what it means to be human.
That's the problem. And of course, the new industrial revolution offers us many opportunities, but it raises manifold questions on the ethical, but even legal implications. And we have to be prepared for it. And that's what we want to do in Davos next year.
Talk about technology and how the ways it can be deployed, that contribute to growth rather than exacerbate unemployment. How will that implement itself?
It's a big question mark because there is a fear that technology, robots, just to take one
you get
element,
productivity from machines.
Exactly, and it replaces maybe the workforce or jobs faster than we can replace them with new jobs. Not everybody can be a robot polisher and so on, so there will be new jobs.
So when you hear him say things like, literally, it's going to change you. It's going to change and impact your identity. Talking about, is it ethical or legal? Do you think it sounds ethical or legal to do this? Of course not. Now, this interview was pre a lot of the stuff that's going on in today's world. How do you think that they would be able to do gene editing on people? Now, you might say, I don't even know what gene editing is, sir, who's talking, who I don't know. Or you might say, Call, what is gene editing? I listen to your channel. I'd like to learn more about gene editing. I'm going to tell you what gene editing is. I'm going to break it down for you in a simple video that I'm going to show you here, so you understand what gene editing is. This is gene editing.
A revolution is taking place in science, one that could potentially cure all disease, nourish the starving millions, and ultimately transform humanity into a race of hyper-intelligent superbeings. Brand new techniques enabling scientists and clinicians to manipulate and change the very genetic code of life itself are coming on stream fast, and the implications are awe-inspiring, if not a little frightening. So join us today as we peer down the microscope for a glimpse of just how gene editing can change the world. Back in 2018, a Chinese scientist called He Zhonghui made headlines around the world by announcing the birth of the first ever gene-edited babies. An associate professor and biophysics researcher, he claimed to have used the sophisticated new DNA editing technique known as CRISPR to manipulate a gene called CCR5 in a pair of twin girls, named Nana and Lulu. This CCR5 gene codes for a particular protein that allows HIV to infect human cells. By disabling this specific gene, he claimed to have genetically engineered Nana and Lulu to be resistant to HIV. His announcement was not in fact welcomed by the scientific community, who expressed outrage that his rash act marked the first step on a long-feared slippery slope towards so-called designer babies. At the very least, his announcement opened up a formidable ethical can of worms. Before we discuss why, let's examine what CRISPR actually is. CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats and is a family of DNA sequences commonly found in the genomes of bacteria. CRISPR acts as part of a bacteria's natural internal defense mechanism, its immune system if you will. It helpfully, for the bacteria anyway, identifies hostile viruses as they're invading and quite literally cuts their DNA to neutralize their threat. To be more precise still, CRISPR is actually a homing device that identifies which specific portion of hostile foreign material needs cutting. Then an enzyme known as Cas9 works alongside CRISPR as a tiny molecular scalpel, precisely snipping the hostile DNA strand and halting any danger in the process. In 2012, scientists led by Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier announced to the world they'd identified a means of hacking this mechanism, using CRISPR-Cas9 to make ultra-specific edits to any given length of genetic code. Let's take a step back and see what all that means. Genomes are long strings of genetic instructions, recipes in effect, which serve as the instructions that make up all living things, from you to a shark to a banana. Genomes consist of just 4 letters, A, C, G, and T, arranged in lengthy strings. CRISPR allows scientists to edit those strings, altering the recipe at the level of individual letters, thus changing whatever life form ultimately emerges out on the other side. This manipulation can be as elementary as switching off certain genes, itself a useful and instructive exercise for helping scientists identify what any given gene actually does. But thanks to refinements in the CRISPR process, new stretches of genetic code can now also be inserted into the genome, as one might copy and paste quotations into a school essay using everyday word processing software. Another more dystopian strand of research suggests that livestock, specifically pigs, could be used as living organ banks, growing hearts, kidneys, or even lungs for transplant patients on top of all that yummy bacon and ham. An American company called eGenesis is currently using CRISPR techniques to that very end, cleverly stamping out porcine retroviruses and other lethal nasties hiding out in the pig genome. In a country where 100,000 people are right now on the waiting list for new organs, with 20 dying from a lack of a good match each day, the need is urgent and the commercial potential obvious. Such medical applications are likely to loom large in the rise of CRISPR over the coming years. Scientists are optimistic that over the coming years, both academia and big money startups will start applying CRISPR to problems like hereditary blindness, heart disease, cystic fibrosis, and even some mental health problems. Even if it doesn't cure cancer overnight, CRISPR offers researchers a uniquely powerful tool with which they can explore the genome. It's relatively simple right now, say, for scientists to tag stretches of genetic code using fluorescent molecules that can track behavior and responsiveness to any given treatment. CRISPR is also remarkably simple and cheap to use, with hundreds of researchers all over the world already using what's been described as the ultimate in democratized biotech. The widespread, almost open source nature of CRISPR technology does have some drawbacks, however, not least the many ethical questions it poses. diseases. If we can, for instance, manipulate a human embryo to eliminate the gene for congenital hearing loss, should we? The tiny embryo obviously can't give consent to such a life-changing procedure, and deaf parents have frequently been known to prefer raising families within their own unique and special deaf culture. It's also difficult to know what any knock-on effect of messing with the very code of life might be. If a scientist makes an edit that subsequently copies and pastes itself down several generations, who's liable for any unforeseen consequences decades or centuries from now? What if hostile actors use CRISPR techniques to create a new, even more deadly global pandemic? Or manufacture horrific biological weapons? Or introduce potent invasive species that upend delicate ecosystems? The global regulatory framework is currently very uneven and in some ways nonsensical. Still, many argue the blockers unfairly lumped CRISPR in with other less sophisticated forms of genetic engineering. The big question that keeps ethics professors up at night remains the issue of so-called designer babies. Using CRISPR techniques to identify potential genetic defects in embryos, as He Jiankui did with his HIV twins, is one thing. But many fear that researchers, or indeed parents, could in future insist on selecting for desirable characteristics like height, eye color, or hyperintelligence. This would of course create a very lucrative business for whoever can reliably provide that system. However, expert consensus suggests that desirable qualities such as intelligence are far too complex to manipulate, involving hundreds or even thousands of different genes, each with subtle relationships and confounding environmental variables. That's for now anyway. But with CRISPR techniques improving all the time, it probably won't be long before somebody starts experimenting in that direction, if they aren't already. So what happened to He Jiankui and the twins? Nana and Lulu, who just turned 2, have quite rightly been kept out of the media spotlight. The global scientific community urgently awaits meaningful evidence to see if their brush with CRISPR has indeed shielded them from congenital HIV, and if there were any unintended consequences. He Jiankui has since found himself sentenced to 3 years in prison for illegal medical practice, and fined 3 million yuan, that's about $430,000. His fellow scientists say he went ahead with the unauthorized research in the vain hope of making a name for himself as the next scientific great, like penicillin discoverer Louis Pasteur. Fortunately, for now at least, ethics are being upheld with the full force of the law, as the implications for future global inequality are too serious to ignore. So gene editing looks set to open new frontiers in medicine, keep everybody fed, and potentially enhance future generations' prospects for surviving and thriving. However, CRISPR is still less than a decade old and needs time to mature. Let's just hope He Jiankui's fate discourages the next scientist who feels like jumping the gun.
Now, you might have seen that and said, wow, that would be great. We can cure all kinds of diseases. We won't have to worry about getting sick. You won't have to worry about a lot of things like that. You know why? Because you won't be human anymore. Because once your genes and your genetics are the same thing, your DNA is altered and changed, you're no longer you. You become one with this technology, which is what you may have heard of as transhumanism. That's what Klaus Schwab was talking about earlier, and what you just saw was gene editing. All of our world leaders are trying to get us to the point where we are now hooked up with technology, literally. So your cell phone and things like that, having it inside of you, connecting you. You might say, well, how is this bad? It's annoying to carry my phone. It's annoying to have my wallet in my back pocket. Well, I'll tell you why it's bad. For starters, you'll no longer be human. And if you're a Christian, here's the news flash. You might have read that book, Revelation, the book of Revelation. You may have read verses in Daniel, in the Bible, and biblically heard about the end times. You won't be able to buy or sell with having a certain mark. Well, the mark is going to be inside of you, and that's what all of this is about. They are openly talking about these things and doing these things, and they have convinced people in our society that this is a conspiracy theory. Is it a conspiracy theory when our world leaders are getting together and talking about just what you heard that man talking about? How would that be a conspiracy? That would be conspiracy fact. I should say, how would that be theory? It's fact that they're meeting and plotting these things. You might not want to grasp this and comprehend this because it might be too much for you because you're afraid. But what are you going to do when this actually is occurring? Oh, wait, it is actually occurring already. You might say, how do we know that? Well, by putting a certain something inside of your body would be the only way that they could begin doing this, wouldn't it be? Now, how could they get people to willingly do that, you'll say? Well, maybe they could scare them so much so that they'd be putting something into their body willingly, maybe not knowing exactly what it's doing, but being so fearful that they do. And as you heard him say earlier, we don't know, but we need to get there. And there's a lot of loopholes to jump through. How can we do this ethically? To them, this and what you see going on right now is ethically. They think that by doing this, by creating something else and getting it inside of people's bodies, that they're not crossing any ethical line, because to them, people are willingly participating in this science experiment. And you may be someone listening who did so yourself. And if you did, all I can tell you is be careful going forward of doing it again. This is the world that we're living in. Technology and humanity are merging, and this is not some conspiracy theory. Our world leaders are telling us. The people that are worshipped in Hollywood are telling us. The people who are listening to all this think that this is all just smoke and mirrors, like they're talking out of their rear ends, because their brains are literally on cruise control. If people snapped out of it, this could be stopped. Humanity could continue. But their goal is to stop humanity, because once your DNA is altered, you are no longer human. You heard it in the interview. Go back, rewind it when I'm finished in a minute, and listen to what they say, what he says, the questions being asked. You, he says, will be changed. Not you, your personality. Hey, we're going to do gene editing, and then you might all of a sudden be like, wow, I feel like, a new man. I feel like I lost 5 pounds. No. You will literally not be you anymore, because you will have your genetic code altered. This video will likely be taken down at some point because they don't want truth out there. If you're not familiar with my channel, I have multiple channels. I've had 7 deleted in the last year. I've had a channel with 530,000 subscribers, demonetized, shut off, brought back, shadow banned. Another one, 400,000. Why? Because they don't want this out there. They think that this is dangerous. Showing you words that come out of their own mouths, showing you what they want to do, is harmful for you to hear. Because they want you to hear them telling you this, but they don't want you to grasp what they're doing. So when people come in and connect the dots, they don't like that. They'll tell you that we're causing uprisings literally, and people are going to the insurrection and things like that because of people such as myself who are showing you what they're doing. When we're not even calling upon violence or anything like that. What we're doing is calling upon an awakening. And that's what this video is for. And that's why they continue to silence people like us, by going to people like you or people like someone you might know and telling them that this is a threat and that people like us should be wearing tinfoil hats. What more do you need to see and hear other than hearing it out of their own mouths? What you need to do is connect the dots and realize it's happening right now, and it's going to continue happening. And they're not joking around. These are your world leaders who were supposedly elected, but selected and put in place for what they're doing right now to humanity. And don't think the stuff going on over in Ukraine isn't factoring into this as well. Please understand the severity of this. If you're one of my subscribers, obviously you're a subscriber if you're listening to this. I hope that this video, I'm making this video for you to share with others, because so many of you have constantly messaged me and say how frustrating it is. I know how frustrating it is. You're not alone. Waking up people who won't wake up. And I wanted to piece this together in hopes that this, in some way, might get them to start thinking rationally. And maybe they'll say, I don't know what you're talking about because I don't know who Klaus Schwab is. Well, you better know. And if you don't know who runs the Federal Reserve, you need to just start educating yourself on the world. This isn't what you think it is that's going on. You think that the world is based on, I want to become famous. You're distracted constantly by nonsense. While these evil, wicked people take control of your lives and your mind by making people waste their lives away on unimportant issues while they're killing off humanity. If you don't know who controls money, if you don't know who controls and wields power in this world, and you think it's just people like Joe Biden and presidents and governors, they're all puppets. They're no different than the actors you see in the movies. Get with it. Wake up. The world needs you still. We need you. We all need to be in this together before humanity is completely eradicated by these people. And it's already begun. The question is, will you get on board? Put your pride down. Put your ego down. Stop thinking about left-right paradigm and I'm a liberal, I'm a Republican. It doesn't matter. It's not real. It's there to distract you from the real enemies of the state, of the world. And if we can do that, maybe, something can be done to stop this atrocity from happening. A reminder, if you haven't joined my website at callforuprising.com, you're someone who's new, I definitely recommend you do. If you're looking for a starting spot on where you can wake up, the website has it all. It has a forum. It has new videos that are uncensored. I don't have to walk around what I'm trying to say, but on here I do. And there's people you can interact with. You can ask questions. Everybody is helping each other in this awakening, so definitely check it out. I want to thank all of you for being here. I hope this video helped. God bless you and your families.